Santa start a fire.
Hi everyone, today I'll be sharing on the miracle of the sun standing still for Joshua as he slayed his enemies in front of the Israelite army. A little context for this passage in Joshua chapter 10 is that Moses has just died and God has anointed Joshua to lead the people of Israel into the promised land. The first 9 chapters of the book of Joshua show victory after victory for the Israelite army. It involves the famous walls of Jericho tumbling down and the Israelites crossing the river Jordan and the river parting for them. And so the Israelite army are on a victory streak and they keep walking towards the promised land. Just before they enter the promised land, the surrounding neighbors, the kings of the Amorites, hear about this, and 5 kings band together to fight against the Israelite army. And that's where the story picks up in Joshua chapter 10. So Joshua goes before God and asks him for his help, as he always does, and the Lord assures Joshua that the enemy will not stand a chance against the Israelite army. They start fighting and hailstones are rained down from heaven, and it says that more of the enemies died from the hailstones than were killed by the swords of the Israelites. We pick up our story in Joshua chapter 10 verse 12, where it says, "On the day the Lord gave the Amorites over to Israel, Joshua said to the Lord in the presence of Israel, 'O sun, stand still over Gibeon, O moon, over the valley of Ajalon.' So the sun stood still and the moon stopped, till the nation avenged itself on its enemies, as it is written in the book of Jasher. The sun stopped in the middle of the sky and delayed going down about a full day. There has never been a day like it before or since, a day when the Lord listened to a man. Surely the Lord was fighting for Israel." What an incredible miracle, and what an incredible story of how God goes against the laws of nature just because a man of God pleaded and asked God for his help. A lot of interesting things about this story is that one of the things is that the Israelites were already winning this war. The hailstones were raining down on them, they were avenging their enemies, but Joshua wanted to completely annihilate the enemies. And instead of asking God for more hailstones or to sustain his army for longer, he asks for the impossible and participates in this miracle with Jesus. This is why in verse 14 it says, "There's never been a day like it before or since when the Lord listened to a man." And what's really encouraging about it is that something miraculous that defied the laws of nature all took place because of Joshua's prayer to God. From reading the rest of the book of Joshua, even the preceding chapters, it is very likely that the Israelites would have won regardless. In some way or the other, God would have delivered the enemy into their hands. But this way, where God displays his complete control of the universe, simply occurred because a man, a desperate man, needing help, asked God and God moved on his behalf. This miracle has always stood out to me because I don't know about you, but I find it easy to believe in the God, the provider, Jehovah Jireh, or the God who heals, or the God who comforts, or the God who brings peace in situations. But I rarely call upon the God who created the universe, and the God who put the sun in its place, separated the land from the sky. That's a facet of God's nature that I rarely call upon. And it reminds me of this passage in Job chapter 38, where Job is questioning God and asking him why he's suffering. And God asks him, "Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me if you understand. Who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know. Who stretched a measuring line across it?" God reminds Job that he created the universe. And I guess the final part of the miracle that really stands out to me is that this miracle would have encouraged Joshua and the Israelite army for years to come. And sometimes a miracle gets you through a season or a particular situation, it solves your problem. But more often than not, it's a reminder of God's faithfulness. And just like the remembrance stones the Israelites would have laid remembering God's faithfulness through the wilderness, they would have remembered this day, the day the sun stood still and the Israelite army won over its enemies. This miracle is particularly personal to me because of a story that happened a couple of years ago. It was one of those days where it was just a really bad day overall. Everything seemed to be going wrong, one thing after another, and I just needed one more thing to go wrong before I would completely lose it. And I stepped out of my bus, walking home, and it started raining completely out of the blue. I didn't have an umbrella, and it was just like the straw that broke the camel's back. I just wanted to sit out on the pavement there and just start crying. And out of a desperate, it was not out of faith. I don't think it was faith. It was just desperation. And I just called out to God and I said, please God, just stop this rain. I do not want to get wet today, sorry, apart from everything else that has been happening. And I kid you not, and sometimes I forget that this happened, the rain stopped. And I actually got home without getting wet. And it was a crazy thing, but I guess that's what a miracle is, that God just moves on your behalf, defying the laws of nature. It doesn't make sense. And some days when I need God desperately, most of my cries to God are from desperation because I have no other option and I want Him to step in, and He does. I remember this time a few years ago where He stopped the rain for just those 10 minutes, and it was His way of saying He heard me, and He's like a father who came down and answered my prayer. And I guess that's what, if there's anything you can take away from the story, that's what I'd like to share, that God is still the God of the miracle working God that you see in the Bible. He still parts seas, and He still makes the sun stand still. He's just waiting for us to step out and ask for something that has never happened before.